Let's finish up our strings chapter by having a look at some of the methods that exist on the string. Now, first things first, let's go ahead and do string.prototype. This is the best way that we can do this. Now, in our Chrome DevTools, we can expand this. Now, it would take hours and hours to show you all of these and all of the use cases. So we're going to pick a few of the common ones. In your own time, I would definitely recommend having a look through some of these just to give you an idea of the different kind of methods that you can use. So we've already looked at char at, which gives us the character at. We can also have things like the character code at, the code point at, string concatenation, whether the string ends with something. But one that I'm going to start with is this string index of. Now, typically the index of is a way that we can try and detect whether something exists in a particular string or not. So it might be that, for example, we have the word pepperoni and we can say index of, and we can simply pass in the letter P. Now, index of is case sensitive. Now, let's save this and see what we get. So we get 0. We know that strings are 0-based indexes. We could do square bracket 0. So that is basically saying what is the index of the letter P. Now, if, for example, this does not exist, so firstly, let's check another one just to make sure. We have 8, but let's say we had the letter Z. This then gives us -1. So this is essentially a way that we can check whether something exists in a string. It could be a ginormous string, it could be a really small string, but index of is a way that we can do that. Now, this is a good way to detect whether we have a particular index of. So if I was interested in the letter P, I might perhaps want to go and use that value of 0, which we get given back, to go and do something else with it. Now, typically what we would do instead of console logging everything, we might do something like if pepperoni index of P does not equal -1, then we would write a conditional block. So this is a good way. We've learned about conditionals, we've learned about if, else, and else if, but now we can start to understand how we can pass these particular expressions into conditionals such as these. So when you're using index of, you may wish to use not equal -1, which is basically the best way that you would want to do that. Now, if, for instance, you're not going to be using the index that's given to you, and you simply want to see whether P is perhaps included, we can use this new ES 2015 method, the string.includes. So if I just want to know whether it exists or not, I can get a true Boolean value back. I don't have to check whether something's not equal to -1. So people over the years have been using not equal to -1 so many times just to check if something exists or not, that they decided it was a good idea to introduce the .includes method to the language. So those are two good pieces of information for your JavaScript string tool belt. Let's have a look at string replacements. Let's go ahead and do pepperoni again. Now what we'll do is hit a string replace. Now a replace takes a few different arguments. So what we're going to replace is the last 3 characters, so O, N, and I, and we'll replace it with something silly like fire. So we have pepper fire. So if you want to replace something in a string, this is a really quick and easy way that we can do that. Now, it's also worth noting that if you're somewhat of a regular expressions kind of person, you can use regular expressions as well. So we could use ONI, and we could be fancy and say that the dollar denotes the end of the string. Now, we're not going to cover regular expressions because that is a whole course in itself. But it's good to know that string replace method can accept a regular expression, or it can accept a regular string object. Another method that we can quickly have a look at, let's have a look at the string slice method. Now, we've actually used this when it came to correctly type checking our numbers and strings. So let's have a closer look at what it does. I'm just going to pass some values in. We'll pass in 2 and -1. Now you can see here that we're left with the middle of the word pepperoni. If we then change this to a 0, what do you think might happen? We get the P and the E come back to life, Now, because we're using a negative number, it's actually going to the end of the string and then coming backwards. If we were to change this to a 1, this actually starts at the beginning of the string. So we're saying, I want to slice everything from index of 0 all the way through to index of 1, which is just one step forward, which is why we have this letter P. Now, if we want to go all the way to the end, we could put this in a variable and do pepperoni.length, and we could -1. Now, this is going to give us everything apart from the last character. If we went ahead and dropped the -1, we would pointlessly have the whole string. So you can pass in whatever you like. It's a good way to slice a string. If we want to start from the end of the string, like I just demonstrated, we could do -1, and then you can see -2. We just slowly make our way back through the string. So it's very precise. You can start at the end, you can start in the middle. We could just start somewhere nearer the middle as well. And that's pretty much it for string slicing. The other thing that I want to show you is how we can split a particular string. So let's assume that we have a couple of different pizzas. We might have a pepperoni, and we'll be boring and just say we've got a plain pizza. Now, there is a space in between these two words. Let's go ahead and be quite interesting, add a little squiggly line, which in JavaScript we call a bitwise operator, but inside a string, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't perform any differently. So we're going to use this special character, and what we're going to say is we want to split this string by our special character. So let's go ahead and press save and just see what we get. Now, this may look familiar, this may look brand new. This is what we call an array, and if we have a look inside it, our array is an ordered collection of data. So by calling a string split, it actually takes either side of our special character. So it's splitting the string straight down the middle here, and it's giving us this value and this value. Now, interestingly enough, we can use square bracket 0 on arrays as well. So an array has a 0 here, and it also has a 1 with the second pizza in. So let's save this out, and we no longer have an array. We have the raw value of pepperoni. If we swap this over to a number 1, we then get plain. So this is an extremely useful way of splitting strings and accessing the remainder of the value. Now there's one more thing. Similar to our string replace, this split also accepts a regular expression, and regular expressions start off with these forward slashes. So we'll go ahead and save this out and just see that the regular expression also works, and a string definitely works as well. Now, it might be that you want to set yourself some tasks. Go ahead and have a look at some of these string methods. Some ones that I would potentially recommend: we have repeat, we have pad, end, start. It might also be worth having a look at the difference between substring and what looks like a shorter version of substring. There's also other things which you've looked at: the to lowercase, to string, to uppercase, and we also have the string trim. Now, while we're here, actually, I'll show you the string trim because it's a really nice feature. So let's assume we have a use case perhaps where someone's entered a credit card detail and they've entered all their card details, but they've decided to be interesting and add loads of spaces around their credit card number, which is what you can actually do if you're using an input type text, for example. Now, if we call a trim on it, it's going to get rid of the entire thing. So you can see here there's no spaces around it. And if we go ahead and remove the string trim, you can see that we have the spaces before and after. Now you may be thinking, why is this important? Remember, we have our dot length. Let's go ahead and dot trim it and then look at the dot length. So you can see by removing the spaces, the length has now changed. And remember, the reason we're seeing 19 is because we have 4, 8, 12, 16, but we have 1, 2, 3 spaces in between, remember. Now, we could, in fact, if we wanted, and this is called chaining, where we do a dot and then something, and then dot and then something. Now, we could call our dot replace and do a forward slash and then a backslash s and then a forward slash. Now, this is a regular expression for white space. Now, the last thing that we need to do is add a G, which means global. So this will replace all the white space in this string. So what we could in fact do is get rid of the trim as an example and replace it with absolutely nothing. So there you go, you have some nice new practical examples of using trims and replaces and how they might fit into a real world scenario.